Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head over to my homeland of Scotland once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel once before. These guys do some very interesting traditional beers, and they've also got a hell of a history behind them as well actually, so I'm really looking forward to reviewing something from these guys again, and I was very impressed with the last beer I had from them, so fingers crossed this one follows along in the same vein. So for this review then we are going to go to Peebles, which is to the south of Edinburgh, the national capital, and we're going to have a look at my second beer from Traquair House Brewery. So this one is called the Lady Nithsdale. It comes in at 8.5% ABV, and this one is a Scotch ale, or as the Americans would call it, a wee heavy. But as I've told you in previous Scotch ale reviews, in Scotland we do have our own classification system, which is called the shilling system, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on in the tasting section of the video, because we will have to try and classify exactly what shilling beer this one is. But yeah, definitely nice to review something different from Traquair House Brewery for you here on the channel once again. The last beer that I reviewed from these guys was the 160 shilling, and that was really nice actually. I very much enjoyed that. I've always been a fan of Scotch ales. I love trying ones from different countries, but you know, to try one from your homeland that you haven't had before is always a little bit special as well. There's some really nice examples. The 160 shilling of course is great, and the other one that I really like is the Old Parochial from Tempest Brewery down in Galashiels in the Scottish borders. They've got a terrific Scotch ale down there actually, and I would recommend you check out that one if you get the chance. But these guys are a little bit more traditional. Tempest are a more kind of American style modern craft brew if you like. These guys are properly kind of old school. You do have the classic Old Jock as well from Broughton Ales, and then Williams Brothers, one of my local breweries, they do a couple of different Scotch ales as well actually that are worth checking out. But yeah, definitely curious to see how this one turns out. This beer was released as part of the Tillfälligt temporary assortment over here in Sweden in Systembolaget on the 17th of November 2020. So yeah, this one I think could be really interesting. I didn't know about this beer before I actually saw it on Systembolaget, and I saw it was Traquair House, so I thought, well, I have to review this one. I have to take any chance to review a Scottish beer that I can, and here we are. So yeah, very much looking forward to this one, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery, and in this case the Traquair House as well. That goes along with it. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Traquair House Brewery before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list at some point in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Scottish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is massively appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Traquair House and Traquair House Brewery then, on to my brewery notes. So as I've mentioned to you already, Traquair House can be found near Peebles to the south of Edinburgh, the national capital. Edinburgh is kind of towards the southeast of the country. But the house is claimed to be the oldest continually inhabited house in Scotland, and it's built on the site of a former hunting area that was used by the Scottish kings from the 12th century. The first noted king that has used this site apparently is Alexander I. But due to the proximity to the English border, it became a very strategic point of defence of the Tweed Valley against the various English invasions that went on, and the house changed hands between the Scottish and English crowns quite often. But King James III, a little bit later on, he conferred the estate on Dr. William Rogers for a small sum of money, and then this was in turn passed on in 1478 to the Earl of Buchan, who later gifted the estate to his illegitimate son James Stewart, who became the first laird of Traquair in 1491. And for a period of time from then, the house passed down the various generations of this family. Later again, in 1875, Traquair passed to a cousin of the Stewarts, which was Henry Constable Maxwell, and he was a direct descendant of the Stewarts through the female line, and it's passed down the various generations of his family since until the present day. So the Traquair House Brewery lies in the wing of the house directly beneath the chapel, and it dates back to the 1700s and originally served as a brewery for the estate, and that was very common in Scotland at the time. A lot of estates used to produce a lot of grain, and they were encouraged by the governments to, you know, distill whisky or to brew beer and things like that, so that's exactly what they did. But the brewery became disused in the 1800s, but it was never dismantled, and the space was gradually filled with family junk and forgotten about. But Peter Stewart Maxwell rediscovered the brewery in the early 1960s, and he began brewing again as an experiment in 1965 using the original equipment, and he also used the original oak tuns as well, which were over 200 years old. But after Peter's death in 1990, his daughter Catherine took over the rung of the brewery, and she expanded it in 1994. These days they employ 2 full-time brewers, and they export their beers across the world, even though the production is still very small at only 1,000 hectolitres of beer per year. So yeah, as I say, a very, very small brewery, this one, just a very small like house brewery as is in the name, but these guys, have to say, do some really nice beers. And if you are after a proper traditional Scotch ale, like a higher alcohol Scotch ale, then you can't really go wrong with Traquair House Brewery in my experience. Probably their best known beer is the Jacobite Ale, and I've never reviewed that one for you, but I think I have a bottle that will have a good bit of age on it actually at home in Scotland. I think it's one of these ones that ended up in my aging box and kind of just I forgot about a little bit. But the first beer, as I say, I reviewed from these guys was the 160 shilling, which also came through Systembolaget here in Sweden, and that one was a beautiful, beautiful beer, I have to say. But yeah, if you want to try a properly old school traditional Scotch ale, then Traquair House Brewery are definitely one that you want to check out. As I say, the only problem that you will have with this brewery is kind of getting a hold of their beers, because they are very small production, and even for me back in Scotland it's very difficult to get a hold of some of these beers because they're just such limited production. I think this one, looking at the bottle, must have been a special batch that they produced for Systembolaget. So yeah, definitely cool to have this one for you here on the channel, but that is all I can really tell you about Traquair House Brewery for the moment. It would be cool to go and visit the brewery and do a little bit of a kind of out and about video, so maybe I can contact them at some point. I've actually never been to Peebles, and that's an area of the country. The southeast of the country is somewhere that I've not really explored all that much thus far actually, so yeah, something that I will maybe seeing about doing at some point. We'll need to see about that. It would be cool to do an interview with Catherine or something like that and talk to her about the house and the brewery and stuff like that. We'll see what we can arrange. Yeah, it would be cool to do that. But yeah, that's all I can tell you about Traquair House Brewery. As I said, if you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the Brewery and Estate website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, on to the beer itself then. So as I mentioned to you at the start of this video, this one is an 8.5% Scotch ale. It's named after Winifred Maxwell, who actually rescued her husband from the Tower of London in 1715. He'd been quite active during the Jacobite rebellions, which happened after the Union, the political union between Scotland and England, where they were trying to put the Stuarts back on the throne, because the Stuarts were exiled, of course. But yeah, her husband was captured and imprisoned during the Jacobite rebellion, and then Lady Nithsdale, as she was known, Winifred Maxwell, she managed to get him out of there in 1715. So very brave woman, I have to say, very, very brave woman. So yeah, quite cool that they named a beer after her. So yeah, I think that is pretty cool. So obviously this house has quite a lot of connection to the Jacobites and things like this. You know, their main beer, their kind of, I don't know if you could call it their flagship beer, is called the Jacobite Ale. But there you can see a portrait of her there, which is pretty cool. But there you can see on the side, Traquair House Brewery. It is just a plain cap on this one, incidentally, and it says on the side here, Lady Nithsdale, a vintage ale from Traquair, best known for arranging the daring escape of her husband William Maxwell from the Tower of London in 1716. Sorry, I told you a lie, 1716, not 1715. Lady Nithsdale is a woman as strong as this malty Scottish ale. Brewed in the 300-year-old brewery at Traquair, Scotland's oldest inhabited house, these rare Scottish ales are fermented in oak and can be enjoyed for up to 10 years. 8.5% ABV, and then it's got, yeah, there you can see it's got Catherine Maxwell Stewart's signature, not symbol, on it there. That is a pretty nice little touch actually. So yeah, I think that is pretty cool, and it does say established 1491. Is that the, I guess that was, am I remembering right? Is that the date of the house. It must be the establishment of the hunting area or something like this. But yeah, like I say, an 8.5% Scotch ale, this one, and it should be quite nice. Actually, it says the exact address of this place is Traquair Innerleithen in Scotland, so yeah, this should be pretty cool. But it says best before September 2030, so yeah, this is going to last for a hell of a long time. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. So like I said to you, the Scotch ales are a very interesting style. In Scotland we have our own system for measuring these, which is called the shilling system. And the shilling, of course, before they decimalised the pound, that was kind of how you did it. You did shillings and sixpence and stuff. I actually don't really know exactly how that system works, because, you know, that was well before my time. 90s child and all of this, 1991, nearly pretty much 1992 to be honest, born at the end of 91. But yeah, the shilling system basically referred to the tax that was on these beers. So basically, as you went up the alcohol scale, or basically it was more to do with the malt. So as the malt content of the beer went up, it created more alcohol, and thus you had to pay a higher tax on it. So you had the 40 shillings all the way up. You had 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 shillings, and then of course you had random things like the 160 shilling, which was just a very, very strong example of the Scotch ale. So yeah, it was to do with the taxing system of these beers in Scotland, but basically as you went up the alcohol scale progressively stronger, you paid a higher tax on it. That is the shilling system in a nutshell. But the term Scotch ale is something that I think was coined by the Americans when they started brewing these beers, and of course the wee heavy, I think, is a term that I had never heard used in Scotland. I'm not sure about that. If some of you are more traditional ale drinkers and watching, do let me know about that in the comment section below. But I was led to believe that the term wee heavy was something that was coined by the Americans when they started brewing these. You know, the probably, I guess, the first American Scotch ale I would have tried would be the Founders Backwoods Bastards and Dirty Bastard and things like that. Those probably would have been the first two that I tried. But yeah, as I say, this is a proper old school version. But Scotch ales, of course, there's a little bit of a difference between the American ones and the Scottish ones. The Scottish ones tend to be a little bit more roasty and toasty and kind of more treacly, whereas the American ones are a little bit more kind of brighter and caramelly in terms of the brown sugars, and the fruits are a little bit brighter, I guess, and juicier in the American ones, whereas in the Scottish ones they've maybe just got a little bit of a kind of cakey and phenolic-y type thing to them. But yeah, I like both. I do have to say I like both. But as you could see, when we poured this beer, we had just a little bit of a kind of thin head on this one. I would describe the head on this beer as being, you know, almost a kind of slightly fawny ivory. Probably more of an ivory colour, to be honest, but that's faded away to just be nothing, and it leaves just a nice little ring around the edge of the glass there. But yeah, if we shine the light through this beer, it's actually very, very clear. This beer is very, very clear, but you're not going to see that on the camera just because of the colour of the thing. But it's actually a very, very dark kind of ruby sort of thing, but to you guys it's going to appear more along the lines of a kind of rosewoody colour. But if you put the light through that, it's got a lovely ruby, very ruby hue to it. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there. But I mean, overall it does look pretty nice actually. I really like how this goes together. So yeah, this beer certainly looks the part. You get Scotch ales, some of them can be a little bit more brown, of course. This one definitely has that lovely kind of ruby tint to it, I have to say. So yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we got on with this one. I'm very, very curious to see how this beer turns out. But 8.5% Scotch ale, this one. Yeah, this is very nice. Love it. It smells very, very clean, I have to say. I like this one. It's got everything that you would expect from this beer style. So yeah. If we were to start with this, as I say, you've got a nice little bit of a kind of brown bready backbone to the beer. You can smell a few kind of toasted grains in there, which is lovely. You do expect that of a Scottish brewed Scotch ale. So yeah, some lovely brown bready notes, a little bit of a kind of grainy and bread crusty note, like I say. In terms of the brown sugars, this one's actually quite bright and sweet compared to some of the other ones that you can get, but it does have that kind of treacly molasses sort of thing, as the Americans would call it. It's definitely got a bit of that in there. But there's a lot more kind of sweet caramel in this one compared to what I remember of the 160 shilling. What you have to remember about these Scotch ales is that the boils of these tend to be quite long. So the longer that you boil, the colour of your beer can be determined by two things. It can be the types of malts that you use, or it can be the length of the boil. And going by the colour of this beer, I would guess that this one has had a fairly long boil, probably at least like 4 or 5 hours, something like this. But the 160 shilling that we reviewed before, which was higher in alcohol, I want to say that was about 9.5 or maybe even higher than that. If I remember rightly, that one will have had an even longer boil than that, and that was almost kind of black, to be honest with you. It was almost the same colour as like a Schwarzbier, a German Schwarzbier or something like this. But yeah, the aromas you get out of this one, I would say the brown sugars are considerably brighter in this than they were in the 160 shilling. It's got quite a bit more of a kind of sweet caramelly element to it. You do get some nice biscuity qualities in there, like McVitie's digestive biscuits. And as I say, the bright brown sugars in there are quite nice, and the more that I smell this beer, the more the biscuit, the kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity thing, starts to come out of this one. So in the very centre of the nose, if you like, you've got a bit of that darker treacly molasses thing, you've got some brighter caramel beyond that, and then you've got some nice kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity notes coming out of this beer too. So the aroma of this one, I think, is very, very nice, I have to say. I like the malty side of this. There's a few woody undertones to it, there's a few nutty kind of things in there, and you do expect that from these Scotch ales. It almost has a wee bit of a kind of slightly cakey type quality to it as well, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, the aroma coming off this beer, I think, is very, very nice. So thumbs up to, definitely a thumbs up in my mind to Traquair House for this one. They've done a really nice job of this in terms of the malty side of things. And the Scotch ale, of course, is a malt forward style of beer. On the hoppy side of things then, there's a little bit of earthiness to this one. You do get a nice little bit of floral note as well on the front of the nose as well. I think there's a wee bit of grassiness in here. I would suspect that this beer has Bramling's Cross hops from England in it. I would suspect that's what's in this one. The other option, of course, would be something like, you know, Northern Brewer from Germany. That would be the other thing that could be in here. You could, of course, use something like something from the States like Eureka or whatever, but considering these guys are a very traditional brewery and they've been brewing these beers for years, I think it's more likely to be Bramling's Cross or a push the Northern Brewer from Germany, which is very popular in the Doppelbox. The English barley wines, of course, have the Bramling's Cross in them usually, but yeah, the fruity notes out of this are they remind me a lot of the Bramling's Cross, to be honest with you, and so does the kind of green side of the beer. So you like to see a little touch of floral note, a little bit of smooth earthiness to this one, and some brighter grassiness, but you've also got some lovely juicy fruity notes to this. So for me, straight away with this one, it's quite a figgy note that comes out of this. It's a lovely light kind of figgy quality that's in there. There are a few little hints of kind of raisins and maybe plums, if you like. You do get a little bit of that in there, but there's some nice oily blackberry blackcurranty type qualities that have come out of this beer as well. So yeah, I really like how this one has how this one's gone to how it goes together in terms of its aroma. It's got kind of everything you would expect, but like I say, compared to other Scotch ales that I've had, this one strikes me as being quite bright in its brown sugars and quite biscuity as well. That's the impression I really get of this one, and that's especially surprising when you consider that this is a Scottish brewed Scotch ale actually, so bear that in mind. But yeah, let's have a little taste of this one then and see how we get on. Take a bit of time to enjoy that aroma though, that's always half the experience when it comes to craft beers. But yeah, this is the Lady Nithsdale, an 8.5% Scotch ale from Traquair House Brewery in Peebles, just to the south of Edinburgh in Scotland. Let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål. Yeah, I'll tell you something. It's a hell of a lot more oily in the aroma. It's a hell of a lot more oily in the flavour, sorry, than the aroma would have you believe. This one, it packs a hell of a punch, this, and this again, this shows you that it's quite a long boil that's gone into this beer. Big caramelisation of sugars. But yeah, it is very, very nice, this one. Again, it comes across as very clean, and it's very clean, but it's got a hell of a lot of flavour in it as well. You know, we do have this thing in Scotland where we're determined that we have the best tap water in the world. And I think we do have one of the best tap waters in the world. Whether it's the best or not, I guess, is debatable. But the thing you always find with a lot of the Scottish beers, I do find that they come across as feeling very, very clean. in a lot of cases, and that's something that I can see with the Swedish and Norwegian beers in particular, over here in Scandinavia as well. So yeah, I really like how this beer goes together. It's awesome. Yeah, this I think is very, very nice actually. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. It's another. I mean, it's almost like it's just like a slightly. It's almost kind of just like the little sister, if you like, of the 160 shilling. It's really nice. I would be very curious to know about their brewing process and how they make all these beers different. But this is just a lovely, lovely Scotch ale. This one, it's got everything that I would expect from a traditional Scottish brewed example of this style. So yeah, let's try and break this down and kind of describe it for you a little bit. I think it's safe to say though, this beer, in terms of its classification style, this is most definitely like an 80 or 90 shilling. It's somewhere in that kind of region, probably a 90 shilling to be honest with you, because it is a big, thick beast, this one, but it's a lovely, lovely beer. So yeah, this is a 90 shilling one. This is at the top of the shilling scale in Scotland. Big, boozy beast, yeah. But yeah, lovely stuff, this one. I've never found out whether there is actually an official, there probably would have been at some point, what like malt to hop ratio or malt volume or whatever. I would be very curious to know that, but I've never actually managed to find it in a brewing archive or anything like that about what the exact conditions are for it to be a 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 shilling and so on. But yeah, of course the 160 shilling is a bit of an outlier, and it's basically, I think that's just, it might be like a double mash or something that they use with that, I don't know. But yeah, this beer is just lovely. So straight away with this one, you get that lovely kind of bready base to the beer. You get that lovely kind of brown bready sort of thing, and it's very smooth actually, and you get a little bit of graininess out of it as you go further into the aftertaste. So yeah, you do get a nice little bit of that kind of bread. You get a little bit of the toasty bread crusty thing in there. There are one or two little roasty notes on towards the back of the palate there, but the middle third of your palate and the back third of your palate has a lovely smooth brown breadiness to it. And then as you move further forward again, you go towards the back of the palate, like I say, you get a few kind of toasty, kind of grainy notes. It's almost on the border between middle third and back third of your palate that you get a few of these toasty or grainy notes in there. You do get some interesting things going on in the border regions in my mind, much as you did in Scottish history of course. But yeah, with this one, lovely kind of smooth brown breadiness there at the back. As you move further forward on the palate, you can feel it smoothens out a little bit. Then as you reach the middle third of your palate, this is where you start to get the brown sugars coming out. So that brown bready base that you've got there, on top of that you've got that big, thick, oily kind of circle, if you like, with all those brown sugars. If you go to the dead centre of your palate, that's where you've got that really thick, treacly molasses sort of thing. And that actually does spread out quite a little bit as you move away from the centre of your palate. You start to get some brighter caramels out of it, and you do get a wee bit of a biscuity note. This is where the discrepancy is, I think, between the aroma and the flavour in this one. This one is a lot more treacly and oily and brown sugary, rather than being the sort of sweet caramel and biscuit that the aroma would have you believe. It's definitely more treacly sort of thing than the aroma. The aroma gives you the impression of quite a bit more brightness to the beer actually. So yeah, I really like. I have to say, I really like how this one goes together. It's a big thumbs up from me actually. The malt base is really nicely done. You will notice a few, if you go to the front corners of your palate, then diagonally back, you will notice a few kind of woody aromas, or flavours, sorry, just coming up out of the palate there. Then if you go to the dead centre of your palate and kind of move forward, you'll get a wee bit of a sort of nutty, a wee kind of nutty kind of thing going out of this one. But if you go into that border region between the middle third of your palate and the front third of your palate, you do get a little bit of that kind of cakey sort of thing. It's like the bit of cake that's on the very edge of it that kind of it just gets a little bit toasty and very thick because of the you know, it's right in contact with the baking tray sort of thing. That's the kind of vibe I really get on the border region with this beer. But let's focus on the hoppy side of it now, and then we'll go back to the fruity side of the beer a bit later. The fruits, the hoppy side of things and the fruits are kind of what you'd expect. Back corners of the palate, you've got a little bit of earthiness there, but as you move further forward on the sides of the tongue, you do get a little bit of herbal quality there, and it's that herbal note that really makes me think English hops. For me, English hops are defined by the kind of earthiness and herbal quality that you get. But on the front corners of the palate, you do get a little bit more of floral character. Then round the very front curve of the tongue, the beer is just a little bit lighter and more grassy in my mind. So yeah, I really like how that goes together in this one. Yeah. So yeah, the green side of the hops are typical Bramley's Cross, I think, and the fruits that you get out of this are definitely Bramley's Cross as well, I think. So yeah, as I always say, on that front third of your palate, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And for me, when you take this one in, you do get a little bit of a plum, you get a little bit of a raisin, and you do get a little bit of that on the back part of that front third of your tongue. But as you move further forward, you get a wee bit of a more kind of juicy figgy sort of thing to it, and then as you reach the very kind of front part of that front third of your tongue, it's got a nice oily blackberry blackcurranty sort of thing, and that again is the kind of signature of Bramley's Cross for me, and I really like that about this beer. Definitely, I really like how that how all of that kind of joins together in this one. But yeah, this one in its flavour profile is really nice. It's a big oily beast. It's not quite as bright and sweet as I was expecting it would be, but it is another very nice example of the style. And this is the key difference, as I say, between the Scottish brewed examples of the Scotch ales and the American ones. It's that more roasty, toasty note there, and as you go further into the aftertaste for this beer, you definitely get more of that toasty kind of bread crusty note out of it, and you've also got a little bit of yeah, you also have a little bit of, how would you say, you do get more of the kind of woody and nutty kind of notes coming out of this beer as well, which is quite nice. But again, those are quite subtle. For me, it's the roastiness that builds in this one. And underneath that front third of your palate, you do get a little bit of that toasty, grainy sort of thing too. But like I say, beautiful beer, this one, and a very nice example of a classic Scottish brewed Scotch ale. I've tried Scotch ales from lots of different countries: Australia, New Zealand, Japan. I think I had one from Hong Kong last year as well, Brazil. I think I've had one from Iceland as well, one from Chile in South America. That was really interesting. You know, I don't know if I've had I think I've had a Canadian one actually from Dieu du Sil, and I've had various ones from America too, but this one I think is a very nice example of the style. It's really cool to go back to, you know, the kind of OGs, if you like, and try these sort of beers. So yeah, try this one if you get the chance. I think maybe I like the 160 shilling a little bit better than this, just because it's even, you know, because it's even bigger. It's one of these things with craft beers. It becomes a little bit addictive in that sense. You know, you want you know, you want as strong a flavour as possible out of these. But I've always had a very strong flavour palate, so maybe I like the 160 shilling a little bit better than this. But this one is a nice treat because we don't really get to review that many Scotch ales for you. But mouthfeel then, let's talk about that in this beer. This is definitely full bodied, there's no doubt in my mind about that. Yeah, absolutely full bodied beer, this one. Carbonation is very smooth. It's a big oily mouthfeel, but it does retain that kind of cleanliness, that clean quality that I was talking about. In terms of bitterness, this beer is quite low in terms of its bitterness. I think it's actually very difficult to say how many IBUs this had, because it does have, as I say, it does build a little bit of a grainy toastiness to it. You get a little bit of bitterness from the hops, but this, it must be just about 30 or something like that. It's difficult to draw the line between the graininess and the hoppy characters, but yeah, nice little bit of malty sweetness in there, highly caramelised sugars like I said, and you've got some nice quite oily fruity notes coming out of the beer as well. But it's really nicely done in my mind. So a big thumbs up to Traquair House Brewery for this, the Lady Nithsdale at 8.5%. I think this is a lovely beer. Not quite as big and beastly as the 160 shilling, but I don't think it's intended to be. I think it's definitely meant to be a little bit of a more less of a beast, basically, I guess we can say that. But yeah, this is a lovely beer, this one, and as I say, thumbs up to Traquair House Brewery for this. So this was a really nice one to get through Systembolaget here in Sweden. Always a treat to review some Scottish beers for you here on the channel. We had a Vault City recently, who are one of the new wave of Scottish breweries that are doing Some really interesting stuff. But yeah, if you want something a little bit more old school, you can't go wrong with Traquair House in my experience. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Traquair House Brewery as well. We will return to these guys at some point in the near future. As I said, I would love to get these guys on for a Meet the Brewery segment with Catherine and Maxwell. That would be awesome to be able to do that and film a little bit in the brewery and stuff. So yeah, we'll see about doing that. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Traquair House Brew, and if you get the chance to try some of these ales, definitely do it. Jacobite Ale is probably the most famous. This one I have enjoyed, but the 160 shilling is a bit of a monster, and I would really recommend that one. Thanks again for watching. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and I'll catch you guys very soon.